expecting action. That is a sort of driver to action that we're seeing these days. Players have a voice, they have a platform, and they're using it, as we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years, in a way that we've never seen before.
England's women's rugby union team will play their first standalone fixture at Twickenham in the 2023 Six Nations. They'll face France there in their final match at the end of April. And Mo Farah has withdrawn from Sunday's London Marathon through injury. The four-time Olympic champion, who won the big half in the capital earlier this month, has a hip problem. He says he's done everything he can to be on the start line, but the issue hasn't improved enough.
LBC News. The latest news headlines next.
Across the UK, people are looking to save on their monthly bills. Switch and save over £200 versus BT on all Vodafone full fibre broadband plans. That's up to 5 times more reliable than standard broadband. From only £20 a month for 24 months. Switch and save today to get reliable broadband without the price tag. Vodafone.
24-month contract. Credit and availability checks apply. Comparison made against comparable BT plans. Terms of verification at vodafone.co.uk/broadband.
Holly and Shanice are prepping for a big weekend away, and it needs to go exactly to plan. So they need to know exactly what they're getting, like the choice of over 800 hotels.
Yes! Right in the centre.
So they're only moments away from where they want to be.
Woo!
With a super comfy bed waiting for them at the end of the night. And with checkout by 12 p.m, they can even hit snooze. Enjoy the same feeling whatever the trip. Premier Inn. Rest easy. Only available to book at premierin.com.
News, sport, travel, weather in 20 minutes. Every 20 minutes, where the news never stops. This is LBC News.
From Global's newsroom, I'm Simon English. The Treasury's second most senior minister says there'll be no U-turn on the government's tax-cutting mini-budget. Chris Philp claims the plans, announced by his boss, the Chancellor, are not to blame for market volatility. The Bank of England has had to intervene to prevent a major crisis by buying up government debt bonds. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer reckons Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng are a danger to the economy.
They took a huge risk. They're like, two gamblers in a casino, chasing a losing run, but they're not gambling their money, they're gambling our money, and that's what's so wrong about this.
Hurricane Ian has hit southwestern Florida, ripping roofs off buildings and flooding coastal towns with seawater. It remains a Category 4 storm, just below the highest category, and has winds of around 150 miles an hour. Russia is denying that it has damaged 2 major gas pipelines in the Baltic Sea, calling the accusations stupid. The EU says it urgently wants to work out what happened to the underwater Nord Stream pipes. Before the war in Ukraine, it was built to take gas from Russia to Europe. The Prime Minister says the UK will not recognise referendums in 4 Moscow-controlled areas of Ukraine. According to Russian-installed officials, they've all voted to join Russia. And Windsor Castle and St George's Chapel are reopening to the public for the first time since the Queen's death. Visitors will be able to see Elizabeth II's final resting place. From Global's newsroom, you're up to date.
LBC News. Weather.
Sunny spells this evening before rain returns in the early hours of Thursday morning. I'm Holly Harris. I'll have a full forecast in 15 minutes.
LBC News. Travel.
The police incident still ongoing on the M25 anti-clockwise at junction 2 at the Dartmouth interchange through to 1B Dartford. The road is closed there, as is the M25 clockwise at junction 14 Heathrow through to the Western Perimeter Road, all because of overnight works. Routes around the region there looking busy. A13 outbound in Dagenham between the Goresbrook interchange and Marsh Way also closed for overnight works until 6 a.m, and the emergency repairs continue if you're travelling in Oxfordshire on the A34 northbound. That's between the A423 at the Southern Bypass Road through to the Botley interchange at the A420. Traffic is light in the area though. I'm Ryan Borthwick. I'll be back with your next update in 20 minutes on LBC News.
This is LBC News.
I'm Rachel Gerrish and this is LBC News. The Chancellor is refusing to change his plans for tax cuts and higher borrowing. Despite warnings, our pension funds came just hours from collapsing earlier, meaning the Bank of England had to step in to help. The pound went into free fall after Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget on Friday. The markets have been spooked. The cost of borrowing's gone up as a result. Hundreds of mortgage products have been pulled from sale. So the banks had to buy £65 million of bonds. It's a type of loan which provides the government with cash. Our business commentator Victoria Scholar can explain a bit more.
It's announced plans to intervene in the bond market by temporarily buying an unlimited amount of long-dated government bonds from today until the 14th of October. And this is in its attempt to try and at least offset some of the volatility and sell-off that we've seen in the bond market that's been creating quite a lot of chaos in financial markets. And the intervention has helped to lift bond prices and reduce bond yields, which move in the opposite direction, because essentially bonds are the way in which the government can borrow money, and investors can buy government bonds and receive a regular income in return for lending money to the Treasury. And the bond market has collapsed lately amid concerns about the rise in government borrowing that's likely to come about on the back of the Chancellor's plans. And one of the most alarming things about today is that we've heard that some of the UK's biggest pension funds warned the central bank that they were facing a cash crisis on the back of this bond market collapse, and pension funds have been massively under pressure, and we understand that that is one of the major reasons why we saw this intervention from the Bank of England today. And some economists saying that the bond market is in the midst of dysfunction with really poor liquidity and bad pricing.
Our business commentator Victoria Scholar there, who is head of investment at Interactive Investor. Well, it's understood that Liz Truss's cabinet's going to be asked to find efficiency savings in Whitehall budgets. I've not heard anything directly from the Prime Minister or the Chancellor on the chaos in the markets. Financial Secretary to the Treasury, Andrew Griffith, has spoken to my LBC colleague Ian Dale, though, and insisted that the planned tax cuts are the right move.
Look, obviously it's difficult times in the market, and that's not unique to the UK. That's something that we see in most of the developed world. As the long-term shock effects of Putin's war in Ukraine filter through, and we've seen that particularly on energy. So I think what the market is looking for is the bank to do exactly what it's done today, which is to make a timely and targeted intervention to ensure orderly financial markets, which is the job of the bank. That's done in close coordination with the Chancellor. And again, I think the markets want to and need to know that the Chancellor, the Treasury and the bank are working incredibly closely together, speaking multiple times a day to make sure that we run the economy and deliver stability at this important point in time. And then I think they need to step back a little bit and understand what the government's trying to achieve with the growth plan. And if you recall, it feels a long time ago, I know, but if you recall, what we announced on Friday was, first of all, to deal with the pressure that households, that your listeners right now, are feeling on energy. Every household in the country will go to bed tonight knowing that we have capped their energy bills. Right now, the IMF
and they're facing massive mortgage rises. So what you did on energy bills is going to be cancelled out by the fact that many average householders are going to probably have double their mortgage payments by the end of the year.
And sad though this is, you know that interest rates are rising all across the Western world. This is not something that is unique to the UK. We're seeing this in all developed markets, some days different rates, but all markets are seeing that interest rate rise. Why are we seeing that? Ultimately, because of what has happened in Ukraine.
Financial Secretary to the Treasury, Andrew Griffith, speaking to my LBC colleague Ian Dale there. Well, Alistair Darling was Labour Chancellor during the 2008 financial crash. He's told my LBC colleague Andrew Marr the difference between these crises is that one is self-inflicted. He wants Parliament to be recalled to deal with it.
The ultimate exit route is a general election, actually, because the landscape has so changed post-pandemic. And then you've got this self-inflicted wound. I think we were never asked, the public was never asked whether or not we wanted what Liz Truss was arguing for during her leadership campaign. That was a decision taken by a very small proportion of the population that is in the Conservative Party. So that's ultimately that's the only way out. I fully understand why you've just got a new leader and you've just got a new Chancellor. But don't think many of the people who supported her would expect things to go so horribly wrong within a week or so of them taking over. Now, that's their problem, not mine. But, sure. I think for the good of this country, because remember, these things take years sometimes to work their way out. The mistakes made in 1972 by a then Conservative Chancellor, it was 10 years before they were inflation was back under control at a terrible cost, with over 3 million people out of work. So, I think they have made a mistake. They're going to have to get their way out of it. I don't think they're going to get away with waiting for 2 months to tell us how they're going to do it. The sooner they do it and accept they've got to come out and explain themselves. And as I say, I readily see some of the things they can roll back, which might alleviate the situation. Yes, there'll be a loss of face, but perhaps there's a bigger loss of face if they go on and get thrown out by the country. All the time that I was dealing with the crisis, 14 years ago, Parliament's the right place to explain yourself. So, I'm fully behind. I see Keir Starmer and others have been calling for Parliament to recall. This is a very serious situation. This is, it's unprecedented. Our borrowing rates are actually cost us more than Greece and Italy. We've had a rebuke from the IMF, which I can tell you from experience is very, very reluctant to criticise, big countries like ourselves. I think we're the biggest. We're the fifth or sixth biggest shareholder in the IMF. This is serious stuff, and there's no better place to explain what you're up to than in the House of Commons. It's probably a more useful thing to do than to go to the Tory Party conference, I would have thought.
Former Labour Chancellor Alistair Darling there. Well, it is 30 years to the month since Black Wednesday. It's when the pound collapsed and Britain had to withdraw from the European exchange rate mechanism. Ken Clarke was the Conservative Chancellor at the time. He's now spoken to LBC News and said the government has to act soon.
It is a serious crisis. It's an extraordinary crisis, politically as well as economically. But it's the economy and people's living that matters most at the moment. I've never known a budget cause a financial crisis like this, and I think the government and the Bank of England are still going to have to act to calm it down and get us back to normality before we work out how we're going to recover. I think the bank has really got to be ready to raise interest rates by a bit. I think they should have perhaps raised interest rates today, not by some panic-causing big sum, not more than 0.5%, as some of the media have been suggesting. In my opinion, 0.5% would have been quite sensible, just to show that they genuinely were independent or going to act. I don't think they can keep saying that they're going to consider whether to raise interest rates in November. And again, the government needs to take a day or two, probably needs a week or two, for the Chancellor to sit down with some serious economic advice from the Treasury, but then make a clear statement of policy and intent. I don't think either of them can wait until November.
Former Conservative Chancellor Ken Clarke there. Well, the Lib Dems have compared the situation to a slow-motion car crash with the British public in the passenger seat. Labour wants last week's budget scrapped, they say, before any more damage is done. So Keir Starmer says he thinks the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are a danger to our economy.
It's a really very serious situation, and this is a self-inflicted wound. The government has lost control of the economy, and that's not some international event that wasn't expected. This is their deliberate decision. And why did they do it? For tax cuts for the very rich, and now there's a loss of confidence in what they have done. And so that's why they need to reverse the budget. They took a huge risk. They're like, two gamblers in a casino, chasing a losing run. But they're not gambling their money, they're gambling our money. And that's what's so wrong about this.
We'll, of course, have much more on this situation to come throughout the programme here on LBC News. But up next, we'll be taking a look stateside to Hurricane Ian. It's battering the southwest coast of Florida. There are warnings of potentially catastrophic storm surges. We'll get the latest in a moment.
This is LBC News.
Unfold big multitasking with the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 4. Big ideas need big conversations. Take a big video call while you watch that big match. And big responsibilities shouldn't stop you grabbing a big bargain. So, unfold a phone with a big screen.
Galaxy Z Fold 4 with multi-window multitasking. Buy yours at Samsung.com by 31st of October and get up to £580 off when you trade in any smartphone in any condition. Example based on the trade-in of a good condition Galaxy S21 Ultra. T's and C's apply.
Alex's work trip was looking like a busy one, so they needed to know PM that day.